In a small remote village, there was a young girl named Adizi. She was born into a world full of beauty and warmth. Her parents were hardworking farmers who adored her, and their home was filled with love. Adizi's world was simple, but it was full of joy. She would run through the fields with her laughter ringing in the air, chasing butterflies and playing with the other children. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Adizi lost her parents at a very tender age. One unfaithful day, these two hardworking parents peacefully crossed the wide village river to go and work on their farm. As the sun sets, the clouds became very thick and there was this terrible storm all over. The clouds became very dark as the night grows old, but Papa and Mama are yet to return home. The poor Adizi was in fear throughout the night until sleep took her away. The next morning, the rumor about the death of these two parents spread out in the village. None of the villagers were able to tell what exactly killed these two innocent souls. Their dead bodies were found at the river bank in a nearby bush. The villagers whispered in sorrow as they looked at the orphan girl, but no one offered to take her in. She was just one more orphan in a world that could barely care for its own. Adizi's life became a lonely struggle. She was too young to work on the land, but the village elders gave her small chores to do. She would carry heavy water pots from the river, wash clothes for the villagers, and help clean the market stalls, and also doing her best to avoid the scorn of others who whispered behind her back. "What's an orphan good for?" they would say. "She doesn't even have a family." But Adizi never complained. She didn't have time for that. Every day, she worked hard, not just for herself but to prove that she could survive on her own. At night, after a long day of labor, she would curl up under the stars, her stomach empty but her heart full of dreams. Dreams of a family of love and safety. Dreams of a life where she was more than just the poor orphan girl. As the years passed, Adizi grew into a young woman, still alone but no longer the fragile child she once was. The village was no kinder to her, but she had learned to endure. She had become like the wind, which is silent and unnoticed, yet always moving forward. Then, one day, a young man named Chidi came to the village. He was handsome, tall, and full of life. His laughter was like the sound of a flute, and his smile lit up the room. Adizi noticed him immediately. He wasn't like the other men in the village, who looked at her with pity and sometimes used abusive words against her. No, Chidi saw her as something else. He spoke to her gently at first, then with greater familiarity he told her she was beautiful, that her strength was something he admired. Chidi swept her off her feet with promises of a life she had never imagined. He spoke of a world beyond the village, a place where there was no hunger, no sorrow, no loneliness. He promised that he would take care of her, that she would never be alone again. Adizi, who had spent so many years starving for love, found herself believing every word he said. His presence filled her with warmth, and for the first time in many years, she felt hope. But hope is a fragile thing, and it can be easily shattered. After some months of secret meetings, Chidi told Adizi that he loved her. His words were so sweet, and they flowed like honey from his lips. Adizi was overjoyed, and soon, they were together in a way that brought even more dreams of a better life. She had never known such happiness, not even in the days before the storm that stole her parents away. And then, one day, Adizi discovered she was pregnant. At first, she was scared. A child. How could she raise a child when she barely had enough to feed herself? But then, she remembered Chidi's promises. She was not alone anymore, she thought. He had promised to be with her and to take care of her. So with trembling hands, she told him the news that she was pregnant. The response she received shattered her heart. Chidi looked at her coldly, with his eyes hard. "What do you want me to do about it?" he asked with his voice void of emotion. I didn't ask for this. You should have been more careful. And instantly, he denied that the child was his. He blamed her for trapping him, accusing her of using him to get pregnant on purpose. Adizzy, who had trusted him with her heart, felt the world around her crumble. How could he be so cruel? She stood there, unable to speak, the weight of his words crushing her. And when she tried to beg him to stay and help her, Chidi walked away. He didn't care. He didn't want to be a father, and he certainly didn't want anything to do with her. Adizzy was alone again, carrying the child of a man who had abandoned her. The villagers, who had once whispered about her, now pointed fingers and mocked her. Look at the orphan girl, carrying a child she can't even care for, they would say. Who will take her in now? Adizzy had no family to turn to and no place to go. She worked harder than ever, doing anything she could to survive. She carried the burden of motherhood alone, as well as the weight of the world's judgment. But every day, as her belly grew, so did her strength. She refused to let the cruelty of others destroy her spirit. She worked in the fields, cleaned the homes of the village elders, and did any labor that would bring in a coin to buy food for her unborn child. Then, one day, while Adizzy was washing clothes by the river, a figure appeared on the horizon. It was a man, tall and strong, with a familiar smile. She blinked in surprise. It was Funny, her childhood friend. She hadn't seen him in years. He had left the village to find work in the city, and she had often wondered what had become of him. Funny walked up to her, his eyes wide with concern. Adizzy, he asked softly. Is this really you? She smiled weakly. It's me, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Funny looked her over, looking into her tired eyes and the heavy burden she carried. He could see the pain in her, the hurt that ran deeper than the skin. But he also saw something else. He saw the strength in her, the strength of a woman who had fought every day just to survive. He knew then that he would not let her face this battle alone. They talked for hours, catching up on lost time. Adizzy told him everything, the storm, the loss of her parents, the betrayal of Chidi and the hardship she had faced. And through it all, Funny listened. His heart broke for her, but he also saw something beautiful in her, a resilience he had never seen in anyone before. He made a promise that day. He would stand by her. He would help her raise her child. He would never leave her like the others had. Adizzy's world began to change. Funny asked her to come live with him. They moved into a small house on the outskirts of the village. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Funny worked hard, providing for them, and Adizzy began to heal. She no longer had to carry her burdens alone. Then, as the days turned to months, Funny did something that made Adizzy's heart sore. He asked her to be his wife. Funny held her hand, walking around the village and making a whole lot of promises to her. Adizzy gladly said, "Yes. Yes. Yes. I will marry you," with tears running down her cheeks. "Thank you for being the sunshine that brightens my heart." They lived together happily, and Adizzy, who was very lucky this time, found her peace of mind. Her new family is something she can hold on to whenever memories reminds her of her parents. Chidi, the heartless young man who now realized his mistakes, came to apologize, but it was too late. Adizzy was far gone from his eyes. The only thing left of him is to be drinking around the village, punishing himself for his own crimes, but that can never bring Adizzy back to him again.